The forests of Belarus held their breath. No bird calls, no radio chatter, no engine noise from the 2 million Soviet troops crammed into positions along a 450-mile front. Radio silence had been enforced for weeks. The maskirovka was complete. 300 kilometers south, German intelligence analysts pored over maps of Ukraine. Colonel Reinhard Gehlein's Fremde Heere Ost had swallowed the bait whole. Fake radio traffic pointed south. Dummy tank formations moved toward Ukraine. Ghost armies assembled in the wrong place while the real hammer massed in the marshes. The quiet Belarus sector barely rated a glance. General Hans Jordan commanded the German Ninth Army, holding that quiet sector. His diary entry from June 19th was prophetic. If a Soviet offensive breaks out, the army will either have to go over to a mobile defense or see its front smashed. His superiors filed the report. Berlin wasn't listening. Obergefreiter Klaus Brenner of the 78th Assault Division checked his watch at 04:59 hours on June 22, 1944. Another quiet morning. The Russians had been docile here for months. Intelligence said the main blow was coming in Ukraine. Who would attack through these god-forsaken swamps? His MG-42 sat unmanned, the ammunition belt coiled beside it like a sleeping snake. 30 seconds. The forest exploded. 10,563 heavy artillery pieces opened fire simultaneously. The barrage shattered the morning like glass. Brenner's eardrums burst in the first salvo. Blood ran down his collar. Trees disintegrated. The earth liquefied. His bunker shook apart timber by timber. Katyusha rockets shrieked overhead in rolling double barrages. 2,306 multiple rocket launchers fired in sequence. Wave after wave. No pause. No mercy. Stalin's organs played their death song across 200 kilometers of front. Brenner crawled through the collapsing timber. His Gewehr 43 had vanished in the chaos. Splinters filled his eyes. The bombardment was unlike anything from training films, unlike Stalingrad stories. This was industrial murder, systematic destruction. The ground bounced like a trampoline. Entire companies simply ceased to exist. 2 hours later, the guns fell silent. Soviet infantry emerged from positions 50 meters away. They had been there all night, watching, waiting. The T-34/85 tanks rolled forward. Their 85mm ZIS S-53 guns swiveled toward German strongpoints. Brenner's 50mm anti-tank gun was useless against the sloped armor. He already knew it. The crews knew it. The loader's hand said otherwise as he fed the first shell. General Hans Jordan stared at his orders in 9th Army headquarters. The same madness that had bled them white at Stalingrad. Feste Pletsa. Fortified positions. Not one step back. He wrote again. It would be possible to stop the enemy offensive, but not under the present directives. Berlin still wasn't listening. 3 nights before the artillery opened fire, the rail lines had died in silence. 10,500 demolition charges. Same moment, night of the 19th to the 20th of June, 1944. Partisan cells had crawled through Belarus marshland for weeks, carrying TNT blocks weighing 2.3 kilograms each. Synchronized watches stolen from dead Germans. 50-gram primers. Timed fuses cut to identical lengths. The charges went under every rail joint along Army Group Center's supply arteries. Precise placement, maximum structural damage. At 02:30 hours, the explosions began. No thunder, just the sound of steel snapping. Rail sections blown 15 meters into the air. Concrete ties shattered into gravel. Bridge supports severed at their foundations. Every ammunition train, every fuel convoy, every medical supply car, cut off simultaneously. Obergefreiter Klaus Brenner felt the first explosion from his guard post near Minsk, a low rumble rolling through the forest floor, then another, then dozens more, rippling across the darkness like distant thunder that never stopped. The 0400 ammunition train from Warsaw derailed in a smoking heap 200 meters from his position. 50 cars of 88mm shells scattered across the marshland like broken toys. Radio intercepts flooded German command posts. Supply train 447 destroyed. Medical convoy halted indefinitely. Fuel depot Orsha cut off completely. The partisan coordination terrified Jordan more than any frontal assault. This wasn't soldiers fighting soldiers. This was the entire countryside turning hostile. Every farmer who'd smiled and sold eggs to German troops might have planted charges under the tracks. Every forest path his patrols had walked could hide explosive specialists timing their fuses. At Fremde Heere Ost intelligence headquarters, confusion reigned. Maps showed intact rail networks. Reality showed 400 kilometers of severed supply lines. Colonel Galen's staff couldn't comprehend the scale. Simultaneous detonations across 3 army group sectors. Coordination, requiring months of planning. No intercepted communications. No advance warning. The partisans had used captured German engineering manuals. They knew rail junction vulnerabilities better than Wehrmacht engineers. The explosion severed not just tracks, but communication cables running parallel to the lines. German units lost contact with divisional headquarters. Artillery batteries couldn't coordinate fire missions. Medical evacuation became impossible. By dawn on June 20th, Army Group Center was starving. Ammunition dumps 300 kilometers away might as well have been on Mars. The rail network lay in pieces. Road transport couldn't handle the tonnage. German divisions began rationing rifle cartridges before Bagration officially commenced. The 78th Assault Division's reinforced artillery positions had plenty of guns. They had no shells to feed them. 10,500 silent explosions. The conventional war was over before it began. The logs went down at 0200. Hours. Soviet engineers worked in silence, laying birch and pine corduroys across the Pripyat marshes. Each log measured 2 meters. Each weighed 40 kilograms. 3 layers deep, cross-hatched. The corduroy road stretched 15 kilometers through terrain German doctrine declared tank-proof. German manuals were clear. Armor belonged on roads, in fields, across bridges. Not in swamps that swallowed half-tracks whole. The Pripyat marshes were impassable. Division intelligence had confirmed it. The Ninth Army's entire defensive posture relied on that certainty. Captain Dmitry Volkov watched his IS-2 heavy tank roll across the makeshift causeway, 46 tons of steel. The 122mm D-25T gun could punch through any German armor at combat range. His crew had welded additional track links to the hull. Below, black water rippled between the logs. His driver downshifted to second gear. The transmission whined. The tank crept forward at 8 kilometers per hour. The logs groaned under. The weight. Water seeped between the gaps. The lead tank's tracks bit into wet bark. The V-12 diesel churned black smoke. Behind him, ISU-152 self-propelled guns followed. Their 152mm ML-20S howitzers could crack any German armor at 2 kilometers. First, they had to reach German armor, through terrain that didn't exist on Wehrmacht tactical maps. Obergefreiter Klaus Weber manned his 50mm anti-tank gun on the eastern flank. His position overlooked dry ground, open fields, killing zones marked with range stakes. The marshes lay to his left, impassable. His commander had said so. Division intelligence had confirmed it. Weber heard the rumble first, low, mechanical, growing louder. He adjusted his binocular focus, nothing but reeds and standing water. The sound grew, like thunder, but steady, unending. He'd heard that sound before, at Kursk, at Kharkov, but not here, never here. Then he saw them, Soviet armor emerging from impossible terrain. T-34s materializing like steel ghosts, their tracks through mud and marsh grass. Their guns traversed toward his position. "Panzer! Panzer in the marsh!" The response crackled back. Static. Confusion. "Repeat your last. No armor possible in Sector 7. Weber watched the lead T-34 halt. The turret rotated. The 85mm gun elevated. He dropped the handset and ran. Volkov's column rolled onto firm ground. The German flank dissolved. Panzer Grenadiers ran from positions designed to face east, not north, not from impossible terrain. The 85mm gun swiveled toward German strongpoints. Weber's 50mm gun was useless against the sloped armor. Direct hits sparked off the glacis plate like pebbles. The IS-2's main gun spoke, high explosive fragmentation. The anti-tank position disappeared in smoke and earth. The corduroy road had taken 6 hours to build. Partisan guides had marked the route. Local knowledge, practical engineering, Soviet tactical doctrine adapted. German doctrine remained rigid. Lieutenant Hans Steiner watched. 14 IS-2s rolled past his foxhole. His Panzerfaust had one shot, effective range 50 meters. The Soviet infantry followed their armor. Submachine guns ready. Steiner stayed low. The impossible had become inevitable. The marshes moved tanks. German doctrine crumbled. Soviet engineering triumphed where Wehrmacht thinking failed. 60 tons of IS-2 heavy tank will do that, especially when it appears where doctrine says it cannot exist. The tactic had been born at Stalingrad. Vasily Chuikov had discovered something brutal and elegant in the rubble of that city. Standard Soviet doctrine called for 200-meter spacing between opposing trenches. Artillery observers needed clear fields of fire. The 122mm M30 howitzers required minimum safe distances. Chuikov threw doctrine into the Volga. "Hug them," his voice cut through cigarette smoke in the command post. "So tight their Stukas can't breathe without killing their own." The mathematics were savage. German air. Superiority evaporated at 30 meters. Luftwaffe. Pilots couldn't drop ordnance without incinerating their own positions. Artillery forward observers couldn't call fire missions without annihilating their own men. The Wehrmacht's technological edge meant nothing when reduced to bayonet distance. Soviet squads armed with PPSH-41 submachine guns and captured Panzerfausts crawled within grenade range. The 71-round drum magazine spat 7.6 2mm Tokarev rounds at 900 per minute. German MG-42s couldn't establish fire superiority. No time, no distance, just steel and flesh grinding together. Hans Weber crouched in the basement of a shattered apartment block. The Russians were everywhere, above him, below him. Through the wall to his left, he could hear Soviet voices, 20 meters away, maybe less. His Gewehr 43 felt worthless. The 7.9 2mm cartridges, designed for 400-meter engagements, meant nothing when the enemy breathed down your neck. The German Hauptmann commanding the forward. Element radioed for immediate Stuka support. Grid reference 347.892. Precise coordinates. The Junkers Ju-87 pilots acknowledged. Engine noise grew from distant hum to screaming dive, then silence. The Stukas circled. circled again. Through field glasses, the Hauptmann watched Soviet muzzle flashes mixing with his own defensive fire. The bomb release points were meaningless. One wrong calculation would incinerate his entire company. The aircraft departed with full bomb loads. "Impossible," the German muttered into his field telephone. "They're in our positions." The Sturmovix had free rein. Soviet Il-2s hammered German rear areas while Luftwaffe pilots watched helplessly, unable to support their own infantry. The Wehrmacht's air advantage, carefully built over years of combined arms doctrine, had been neutralized by 30 meters of contested ground. Chuikov's 8th Guards Army pressed forward 20 to 50 meters from German lines, close enough to hear whispered orders. The 82 millimeter mortars had minimum ranges of 100 meters, useless when your target lived next door. German 20 millimeter flak guns couldn't depress low enough to engage infantry in adjacent foxholes. "Range to enemy positions?" Chuikov asked during the 0800 briefing. 12 meters, Comrade General. Close enough to share cigarettes." The Hauptmann's final radio transmission logged at 0847 hours spoke of Soviet grenades landing in German command trenches. His voice carried exhausted resignation. These Russians fought like madmen, close enough to see their faces, close enough to smell their fear. Obergefreiter Klaus Richter watched Soviet infantry emerge from a crater 15 meters away. His squad had no supporting fire, no air cover, no artillery. The Russians had neutralized everything that made the Wehrmacht superior. His MP-40 held 32 9mm rounds. He'd counted. The Ivans kept coming. His machine gunner was dead. His radio operator was dead. The Soviet soldiers were 10 meters away. Then, 5. Richter closed his eyes. The hugging tactic spread through Soviet commands like fever. What worked in Stalingrad would work anywhere. Get close. Stay close. Make their technology worthless. Turn their air force into spectators. The Germans called it Rattenkrieg, rat war. They missed the point entirely. The rats were winning. The artillery fell silent at 700 hours. The earth still trembled. From the Pripyat marshes came the sound that would haunt German survivors for decades. Tank tracks. Hundreds of them. M4, A2 Shermans, and Valentine tanks grinding through terrain the Wehrmacht had deemed impassable. The 3rd Guards Mechanized Corps was moving. 20 kilometers the first day. 25 the second. The advance rate defied everything in German tactical doctrine. Obergefreiter Klaus Brenner crouched behind his MG-42 as the first T-34/85 emerged from the tree line. The 85mm ZISS-53 gun swiveled toward his position. Brenner had seen Shermans in France. This was different. The crews moved with mechanical precision, no hesitation. The machine gun nest to his left vanished in a flash of high explosive. Then another T-34, then another. Brenner tried to count them. 20, 30. His hand shook as he fed a fresh belt into the MG-42. The first round from the T-34 landed 3 meters short. Dirt showered his position. The second round would not miss. Brenner abandoned his gun and ran. Behind the armor came the ISU-152 self-propelled guns. Their 152mm rounds cracked concrete bunkers like eggshells. Wehrmacht soldiers watched T-34s emerge from marshes, their own maps marked impassable. The sound of tracks on corduroy roads meant another flank had collapsed. Soviet cavalry mechanized groups exploited every breakthrough. Horse cavalry moved through marsh terrain where German armor bogged down. T-34/85s raced alongside Cossack horses through swamp channels. The 85mm ZSS-53 outranged German 50mm anti-tank weapons by 800 meters. ISU 152. Assault guns demolished Festeplätze strongholds with single rounds. Modern war meeting ancient mobility. Lend-Lease Studebaker trucks carried fresh infantry to each breakthrough point. 427,000 American trucks keeping Soviet momentum alive. The Wehrmacht's defensive lines collapsed faster than new ones could form. Hauptmann Friedrich Weber watched the Soviet juggernaut approach his regiment's position outside Minsk. 12 hours earlier, they had held a solid defensive line. Now scattered groups of Lancer clutched empty Gewehr 43s and prayed. Weber counted 40 tanks in the first wave alone. More followed through the smoke. His radio operator reported contact lost with division. Weber looked at his remaining 37 men, boys mostly, faces gray with terror. Herr Hauptmann, his sergeant whispered. Orders? Weber watched a Sherman crush their forward bunker like cardboard. The machine gun crew vanished beneath 30 tons of steel. Fall. Back, he said quietly. But there was nowhere left to run. Obergefreiter Klaus Zimmermann wrote to his wife, "The Russians come from everywhere. Our orders say, hold position. Position is already gone. We wait to die because retreat means court-martial." His letter was found on his body 3 days later. Jordan's warnings proved accurate. The 3rd Guards Mechanized Corps advanced 180 kilometers in 5 days. The Minsk cauldron trapped thousands in a 10-square-mile death trap. No supplies, no ammunition, no retreat permitted. The Festeplätze had delivered exactly what Hitler promised. Death before retreat, just not the enemy's death. Lieutenant General Müller's radio crackled in the Minsk pocket. Our fighting capacity is practically reduced to nothing. Immediately stop resistance. Herr General, the men are ready to continue fighting, Major Hoffman replied. With what? Empty chambers and prayer? The final breakout attempts used cold steel. Weber pressed his carabiner 98K against the rubble. The rifle's bolt action felt smooth in his trembling hands. 7 rounds left. He had been hoarding them for 3 days. His hand shook as Soviet voices grew closer through the smoke. Weber, fix bayonets. Hauptmann Richter's voice cracked. The order made no sense. Cold steel against T-34/85 tanks and ISU 152 self-propelled guns. But ammunition was gone. The final breakout would be with blade and desperation. Senior Lieutenant Dmitry Volkov carried his PPSH-41 through the debris field. He had learned urban warfare under Chuikov's doctrine. Stay close. Deny breathing room. He spotted movement in the collapsed Wehrmacht position ahead. German voices whispered frantically. These weren't the confident Wehrmacht troops who had marched toward Moscow in 1941. These were broken men clutching empty rifles and fixed bayonets. The German boy soldier couldn't be older than 17. His uniform hung loose on his starved frame. Volkov watched him struggle to work the bolt of his carabiner 98K. The metallic click echoed hollow. Empty chamber. The boy's eyes went wide with terror. Volkov raised his PPSH-41. "Kamerad!" Weber screamed. His hand shot skyward. The firing stopped at 14:30 hours. Weber dropped his rifle. The 25-centimeter bayonet clattered against rubble. Hands rose across the pocket. White flags appeared. Torn undershirts tied to rifle barrels. The Minsk cauldron was closing. The surrender spread through the pocket like infection. Weapons dropped. Hands rose. 57,000 German prisoners would march through Moscow in 3 weeks. The men who had fired their last MG-42 rounds at T-34/85s rolling through Belarus marshland. The ones who could still walk. The cattle cars rolled into Moscow at dawn. Red Square had been cleared. 250,000 Muscovites lined the route 20 deep. They had waited 3 years for this moment. The concrete still bore scars from German artillery shells that never fell. On the capital, 57,000 prisoners in field gray uniform shuffled forward in columns of 20. Gaunt faces, torn tunics, boots held together with wire and cloth. These were the survivors of Army Group Center. Oberfeldwebel Heinrich Krause felt the eyes burning into him. Thousands of Soviet citizens, women whose husbands died at Leningrad, children who ate sawdust bread through the siege winters. The silence was worse than screaming. These people had lost 27 million. Now they watched the invaders shuffle past like broken scarecrows. Krause's stomach cramped. He hadn't eaten in 4 days. The man beside him collapsed. Nobody stopped to help. The column kept moving. 20 abreast. Always 20 abreast. They had been told the parade would take 90 minutes, every minute calculated, every step measured. Soviet propaganda grinding their humiliation into the world's consciousness. Behind them came the street-washing trucks, following their path, washing away. The contamination, cleansing the motherland of fascist footsteps. "Keep your head up, Heinrich," Hauptmann Weber whispered. "Don't give them the satisfaction." But Krause couldn't lift his eyes. The concrete stretched endlessly ahead. A woman spat. The saliva hit his cheek. He didn't wipe it away. The generals marched at the front. What was left of them? Lieutenant General Miller had already surrendered outside Minsk. Fighting capacity practically reduced to nothing. His exact words. General Jordan's diary predictions had come true. The front was smashed. Army Group Center obliterated in 3 weeks. Soviet cameramen with 35mm Convas cameras recorded every stumbling step. The broken spine of the Wehrmacht on display. The footage would play in cinemas from London to San Francisco. Proof that Hitler's war machine was bleeding out in the Russian mud. Oberst Klaus Weber tried maintaining military bearing. His Wehrmacht tunic bore grease stains from crawling through Pripyat marsh. Mud. He remembered the Soviet artillery barrage that started it all. 122mm M30 howitzers firing for 2 straight hours. The earth splitting open. His radio operator vaporized beside him. Weber caught sight of a familiar face in the crowd. A Red Army colonel with metal ribbons covering his chest. The same officer who had accepted his surrender outside Minsk. The Russian's eyes held no triumph, just professional assessment of a job completed. Behind the officers came the enlisted men. Gefreiter Heinrich Stolz had served with the 78th Assault Division, reinforced with extra artillery, positioned in what Hitler called Feste Plätze, fortified positions that consumed manpower while providing no strategic value. They had held their ground because retreat meant summary execution. Now surrender meant this march of shame. The parade took exactly 90 minutes, time to the second. When the last prisoner disappeared into the holding compound, the crowd began to disperse. They had witnessed the Wehrmacht's funeral procession. The street-washing trucks continued spraying, washing the stones clean, preparing Moscow for its next victory parade. The death warrant for Berlin had been signed in the Belarus mud, not with ink, with blood and 122mm high explosive shells. The road to Hitler's bunker ran straight through the corpse of Army Group Center. Jordan's final diary entry was an epitaph. Army Group Center faced inevitable destruction under Hitler's no-retreat orders. The 400-kilometer gap torn through German lines became Stalin's Highway West. Every veteran division destroyed in Belarus was one less blocking the road to the Reich. The regiments that had fought at Kursk and Kharkov, that understood combined arms, that knew how to kill T-34s, were gone. buried in Belarusian marsh mud or marching through Red Square. The replacements heading for Berlin's defense would be 16-year-old Hitler Youth clutching Panzerfaust. Old men from the Volkssturm, issued single-shot rifles and told to die for the fatherland. Panzerfausts against IS 3 heavy tanks. Gewehr 43s against Guards rifle regiments. Weber calculated it from his foxhole before the surrender. 6 months to Warsaw, 8 months to the Oder River. The arithmetic of annihilation was simple. The 3rd Guards Mechanized Corps had advanced 180 kilometers in 5 days across marshland the Wehrmacht called impassable. The Katyusha rocket launchers were already loading for the next barrage. It had begun with perfect silence. 2 million men holding their breath in Belarus forests, while German intelligence stared at Ukraine. It had continued with 10,500 demolition charges, destroying Army Group Center's supply lines 3 days before a single Soviet soldier stepped into the open. It had accelerated through impossible marshes, through corduroy roads built log by log in total darkness, through hugging tactics that turned Luftwaffe supremacy into helpless observation. The maskirovka had been perfect. The engineering had been audacious. The execution had been merciless. And when the guns finally opened at 0500 hours on June 22nd, 1944, exactly 3 years to the day after Germany had invaded the Soviet Union, they were merely finishing what the partisans had started 3 nights earlier in the darkness. 57,000 prisoners, 90 minutes. Street-washing trucks following behind. The sound of 228,000 boots on stone would echo through Red Square for decades. The reckoning had arrived. If you enjoyed this story, hit subscribe for more World War II historical deep dives every week. Thanks for watching.